I'd like to start, Steve, by asking you, I mean, the reference to hunger and the connection between those two films for me, something that Ian Canning, one of the producers of the film, said about the relationship between the two, almost like an inverse relationship in terms of the body and the idea of freedom and the body. And we have Bobby Sands in Hunger kind of, fighting to, in the constraints of prison, to express freedom as best he can. And here we have a character who has every kind of freedom and yet is creating almost a prison for himself with his own body. Is this, a sort of, I guess, were you thinking of the two films together when you evolved this one, or did you start very much from scratch with this?
Well, no, I wasn't thinking of that when I started the film. I just was so focused on after I had a conversation with Abby Morgan, the co-writer, about sexual addiction. But as the film, as we started to develop the film, the screenplay, those thoughts were coming into mind. The whole idea of someone who's incarcerated, but within that incarceration, creating their own freedom through not eating. And on the flip side, of course, you have Brandon, who is in this sort of mecca such of Western freedom, the city of access and excess, 24-hour city, New York. But within that, and this is a very attractive man. He has a good job, well-paid job. But within that, this person puts himself into his own prison. Why? And it was just fascinating to see the contrast. I mean, I that was never my intention to do an opposite of, but it just sort of became that.
So can you talk about how you I guess firstly how you came to be collaborating with Abby, but also how you came to choose this as the sort of subject of the film, and was it the sex that came first, or the idea of addiction that came first as the subject that you wanted to explore?
I mean, Abby, I didn't know Abby Morgan. I had no idea who she was, but she wanted to meet me. We met in a cafe, and I thought, okay, well, I've only got 45 minutes. 3.5 hours later, we were still talking. The conversation started about the internet, and then pornography on the internet, and then sexual addiction, and then that sort of just sparked something in my head. The whole idea that everyone here, 99% of us have had sex, or at least think about sex, or we all come through a certain kind of sexual sort of we had sexual encounters in one way, shape, form, or the other. But what fascinated me about that was I find it very interesting that how within cinema, because sex is still a taboo. I feel that we have had so much resistance in a way to the film, and just because of sex. But if I had, if this was a violent movie about a bank robbery, there'd be no. I mean, it's interesting. The norm is not exotic. What is exotic is someone with a gun in their hand, but that is not exotic to us as cinema goers. So it's interesting when we talk about the person, when we talk about things which are very much close to us, that becomes a problem, or that becomes something which shouldn't be spoken about, or it becomes difficult. I find it odd, and that's what I was interested in. I was interested in sort of, what was interesting. What Abby said to me is, the film is almost like a dog whistle going off in the cinema. Everyone knows what this is about. Everyone has a relationship to this, in one way, shape, form, or the other. And the thing about the situation is also to do with addiction in general. When you think of drug addiction or alcohol addiction, yes, that to some extent, for the majority of us, of course, people have had drug problems and alcohol problems, but the vast majority haven't. And therefore, that becomes exotic. But sex, is extraordinary. It is us. We eat and then we think about sex a lot. At least I do. Tell me I'm lying.
No, but it's a very interesting kind of connection, because if you think about how many films are comfortable exploring the space of addiction when it comes to drug addiction or alcoholism, that's something that we see a lot on screen.
Yes, and you think of things like A Man with a Golden Arm, or you're going back with Billy Wilder, Lost Weekend. At the time, alcohol addiction was seen as some kind of disease, some sort of strange people who have some kind of stupid disease, or not stupid disease, but have a problem. But now there's a sympathy for alcoholics, of course, and they should be, as well as drug addicts. But sexual addiction there's a stigma with sex anyway, and I think that's a huge sort of. I mean, I'll go as far as saying I think it's people with sexual addiction. It's almost like the early '80s with people with AIDS and HIV. The way people are treated or looked upon. I mean, no wonder we couldn't actually. I mean, the original idea was to film this in London, but no one would speak to us. Yeah, no one would speak to us about sexual addiction because at the time people didn't want to speak about it. I think it was a time of Tiger Woods, but also people were so ashamed. And it's kind of, it's funny, yeah, it is funny, but when you start talking to people who've had this affliction and how it ruins lives, it's serious. But again, I was like most people. When you first hear about sexual addiction, you laugh, of course. But when you realize, in order to get through a day, similar to an alcoholic, you drink a bottle and a half of whiskey or vodka or whatever it is, in order to get through a day for a sex addict, to have to relieve themselves 25 times a day or lock themselves in a room for 72 hours with, looking at sort of pornography, it ceases to become funny and it ruins lives.
The idea of when you're approaching the character, did you think about how you were going to draw the audience in and out of a sense of empathy with him?
Yes, that was very important. Very important, because how do we keep people, focus on Brand? How do we keep them interested in him? Very difficult to balance. It was a fine line. And how do you do that? Do you get him talking to, there's a lot of things you got to tell him talking to a shrink, so therefore or his best friend. That's bullshit. It never happens. No one goes, this is what I'm feeling, and sometimes you don't even know how you're feeling. And Brandon is one of those people who is sort of searching. It's like again the description. The lights are off in a room, and he's trying to find his way. Find the architecture of what's going on with him, but in some ways he's not so bothered because it's not damaging him yet. But he gets to a point where it is damaging him, and then he wants to sort of, maybe get some sort of help. I don't know at the end of the movie, but it's how. That was a tricky one. I haven't got the answer to that. How did we do that? How did we do that? We had Michael Fassbender, which wasn't a bad thing to have, but at the same time, it's like the anti-hero. How do you make him he's not a bad person, Brandon. He's just not a bad person. He's having difficulties. I mean, to be a human being is difficult often. He's not a bad person. He's just trying. And often, sometimes, most of the time, we're blind to things which are in front of us.
Can I ask you about the collaboration with Michael? Because it's such we've seen two extremely powerful collaborations from the two of you, and also, of course, Sean Bobbit, who's the
DP, yeah.
the DOP, who's very much a sort of, for me, watching the film, a present collaborator in what we see on screen. How important was it for you? Like, did you write the film with Michael in mind? Did you?
No. Would never do that because I think he has to come in to do whatever he does. I mean, I asked him, but the character's a character. Brandon Sullivan is Brandon Sullivan. He's not Michael Fassbender. So when I give him the script, of course I do the best I can. Hopefully you like it, and maybe thank God he did. And then we take it from there. The collaboration is very strange because in Hunger we went so far in our relationship, so far in how we worked together. And of course it was fairly extreme. There was this amazing closeness. It was very, what was interesting about Hunger was what was happening behind the camera and in front of the camera was extraordinary. In the way that what was happening behind the camera with us was this huge camaraderie with the crew. It was amazing. It was one of the best experiences I've ever had. We were all there for a reason. And what was interesting about it was also, most of the people, I didn't know who was Catholic, who was Protestant. I only found out that Michael I didn't even know until a year after. I wasn't interested in asking him. Didn't know. Didn't really care. Just do your job. So what was interesting about that was I didn't, people felt they could do something about something which happened in their history 25 years ago. And that was wonderful, that there was this camaraderie and, I didn't know who was what and what was what, and everyone would just get on. So that was happening on the other side, on one side of the lens. The other side of the lens was something which was everyone giving their all. With myself and Michael in particular, there was a situation where we got this trust. Because when you go through that, and you come out the other end, you do have a bond similar to Sean Bobbit. I've been working with Sean now for 11 years, my cameraman, and yeah, he's gold. Yeah.
The character of New York in the film is to me really interesting because you've painted it not through the romantic lens that we're very, often see New York as a character in films, but more through a city that kind of embodies this sort of distance and anonymity, in terms of his character.
I mean, what's interesting about living in New York, working in New York, I mean, I was at NYU and I went back to obviously make this film, and a lot of relatives live there. Was a lot of New Yorkers live and work in the sky. And that's strange. That's interesting for me. I was living on the 27th floor. We were shooting on the 23rd floor. You're always in the sky. And what happens in this situation is you have always in these buildings, you have these huge vistas, these huge, massive windows within this outlooking into the cityscape. So you're in this sort of strange situation where, for example, like Brandon's apartment, which is on the 25th floor, where you have this very sort of, small room, but with these huge vistas of the city, meaning that when you're looking, when you're in this space, you're looking out into the window, and you're seeing this metropolis in front of you, but you're always reflected in the glass, meaning that you're always in perspective of the city. Who am I in this sort of huge, vast city? What am I in this? You're always physically in perspective of this. It's kind of crazy. It does something to your head after a while. It really does something to your head. Who am I? What am I? What is my significance in this? In a visual sense, your significance is not very big at all. So it has this sort of Edward Hopper sort of quality to it. This sort of sense of reflecting back on yourself and in fact loneliness in a kind of strange, odd way. But the whole idea of this vista is freedom. But actually, what it does is somehow makes you even smaller than you actually are. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that was one of the things about New York which was interesting to me to think about, with all these people living and working in the sky. And also when we're shooting, for example, when Brandon is running in the street, it's about ritual. It's Tai Chi. Just to follow a ritual, normal ritual, going the subway, coming back from work, running from the subway to his house. All these things are actually geographically correct. And no, I'm not making an advert, so I don't care. So often things which are ugly turn out to be beautiful because you have to deal with them. So, for example, the architecture of Brandon's apartment, it was tight in there. Carrie and Michael is tight, and the crew is tight. But what it does is limit you. But with that limitation, it gives you freedom because it's telling you where to put the bloody camera. Wonderful.